Welcome back to Vuln Vibes. In this episode, we are going to talk about Android Zero-Click RCE patched. Today, we're diving into the November 2025 Android Security Bulletin. It dropped November 3rd. And honestly, everything in our sources points to one thing: a really critical, high-impact vulnerability. This isn't just another bug fix. It feels like it fundamentally shifts the risk landscape for, well, the whole Android ecosystem.
Absolutely. We're not talking minor permission tweaks here. This feels more like state-level threat analysis territory.
Right. And the absolute centerpiece, the one that should have every security team, scrambling to check their patch levels right now, is CVE-2025-48593. It's a critical remote code execution vulnerability, and it's in the core Android system component itself.
Yeah. And, we see critical RCEs fairly often, but it's that zero-click part that really changes everything, that modifier. It elevates this from just like a serious problem to a genuine red alert.
Zero click.
Exactly. We're talking maximum threat surface. The attack runs without the user doing anything. Clicking a link, opening a file, none of that.
So for the security pro listening, that means the human firewall, user awareness training, it's basically irrelevant here.
Completely irrelevant. It bypasses that entire layer.
Okay, so let's unpack the mechanics of this zero-click threat, because that technical detail, it's crucial, isn't it? Our sources are really clear. CVE 2025-48593, no user interaction needed, and importantly, no extra privileges needed to get it running. I mean, in a modern OS, one that's supposedly hardened, how does that kind of vulnerability even happen?
Well, it usually points to a pretty fundamental flaw, often in how a core component handles untrusted input. Think about it. Google doesn't spell out the exact vector naturally, but typically zero-click in the system component. You're looking at things like specially crafted network packets maybe, or perhaps malformed messages sent through the internal binder system, or even, memory corruption when processing media files or maybe rich communications data. The key thing is the attacker isn't just hitting an app, they're hitting the bedrock, the framework underneath all the apps. And from there, they can run their own code remotely.
Wow. And that capability, executing arbitrary code with zero clicks, that just wipes out a huge part of our standard defense playbook, doesn't it?
It really does. So much of what we do relies on user behavior, right? We train people, we use EDR tools that watch application activity, look at process chains.
Yeah.
None of that comes into play if the attack is purely at the platform level. If this exploit works, it's a straight-up platform defense failure. It happens silently, way down low, often before any higher-level security logs even notice.
Honestly, it sounds like the kind of sophisticated attack we usually associate with, like nation-state actors targeting specific high-value individuals. This isn't your average malware.
Exactly. And Google's severity rating backs that up. They slapped a critical on it, no hesitation. Their bulletin even says, and this is important, it could lead to complete system compromise if, and it's a big if, the platform and service mitigations are disabled or somehow bypassed.
That bypassed clause.
That's the bit that keeps security engineers up at night. It's an admission that even the built-in sandbox or other exploit defenses might not hold up against a really well-crafted, weaponized exploit.
Okay, so we've established it's bad. Really bad. The next logical question is, how many devices are we talking about? What's the scope here? Because the bulletin isn't just talking about the latest phones. It lists affected versions as Android 13, 14, 15, and the newest, Android 16. That's huge.
It's staggering. That breadth is just enormous. You're covering years of devices, millions, maybe billions, still actively used by consumers, by businesses. And many of those might be outside their main update support window from carriers or the manufacturers themselves, which complicates patching.
Right.
So this widespread impact, that's what makes it so strategically important. It's not just a technical flaw. It's a potential vector for mass compromise.
And that criticality rating makes sense then. It's not just the ease of exploitation, the zero-click part, but also what an attacker gets if they succeed.
Precisely. You're talking unauthorized access to everything. Sensitive user data, messages, maybe credentials stored on the device, location history, microphone, camera, all potentially accessible. And often, without leaving any obvious trace, the user would spot. It's like a master key for potentially millions of devices worldwide.
Okay, so the RCE CVE 2025-48593, that's clearly the main event. But the bulletin mentioned another one, didn't it? An elevation of privilege, EOP, flaw.
Yeah, that's CVE 2025-48581, rated high severity.
Now, help me understand why an EOP flaw matters so much here. If an attacker already has remote code execution from the first vulnerability, Don't they already have significant access? Seems like overkill.
That's a really good question, and it highlights how modern exploits often work in chains. So the initial RCE, the zero-click one, it gets the attacker's code running, yes, but it probably lands them inside a fairly restricted environment, like a sandbox associated with whatever system component they exploited, maybe running as a low-privileged user. A sophisticated attacker doesn't want to just run code. They want full control. They want persistence. They want root access. This specific EOP flaw, CVE-2025-48593, it only affects Android 16 according to the bulletin, and that's the key. Android 16 being the newest has tougher defenses, think stricter Linux policies, maybe things like memory tagging, more kernel hardening, just generally a harder target. So the attacker uses the zero-click RCE to get a foothold, but then they hit these newer, stronger walls on Android 16.
Right.
The EOP flaw, CVE-2025-48593, is the specialized tool they need next to break out of that initial confinement on those modern devices. It lets them escalate their privileges up to system level, maybe even root. That's how they gain full control, ensure they can survive a reboot, and basically operate outside the limits of that initial entry point. It turns a temporary breach into a persistent backdoor.
Got it. So the RCE is the door opener, and the EOP is the key to getting full run of the house, especially on the latest, most secure versions. It shows that modular approach to building exploits. All right, let's shift gears then. How is the industry actually defending against something this serious? The ecosystem response must be critical. Talk about Google's coordinated disclosure process, the CDP.
Yeah, the CDP is fundamental here. The absolutely crucial part is that Google notified its Android partners, the device manufacturers, the OEMs, at least a month before this bulletin went public.
A month's lead time.
Exactly. That lead time is vital. It gives those manufacturers a window, hopefully long enough, to develop the patches, test them so they don't break anything else.
Regression testing.
And start rolling them out before the vulnerability details inevitably become more widely known and exploited by attackers. It's about minimizing that window of exposure.
And for folks who work with AOSP directly, maybe building custom ROMs or doing deep security audits,
Google's pretty transparent there. The source code patches themselves are set to be released to the Android open source project, AOSP, within about 48 hours of the bulletin going live.
that's fast.
It is. And that quick release helps the entire community, and not just the big manufacturers, respond faster.
So operationally, for anyone managing devices, what's the bottom line?
It boils down to one thing: checking the security patch level. Any device running the patch level dated 2025-11-01 or later is considered protected against these specific flaws. And the mandate to manufacturers is crystal clear. They must declare they're using this specific patch level, 2025-11-01, and they have to ensure all the fixes listed in that bulletin, including this critical RCE, are actually in their update.
So for IT admins listening, that patch level date is the single most critical piece of information to audit across their entire Android fleet right now.
Absolutely. Anything older than 2025-11-01 has to be treated as potentially vulnerable, maybe even compromised.
Okay, but patching takes time, right? There's always a gap. What about the other layers of security? Does something like Google Play Protect help at all here, especially in that dangerous period between disclosure and widespread patching?
It does, but indirectly. Play Protect and the other Android security platform features, they aren't necessarily blocking the initial zero-click exploit itself, because that's happening at a very low level. What they are good at is looking for the consequences of exploitation. They're scanning for potentially harmful apps that might get installed after the initial breach, or looking for unusual abusive behavior patterns that suggest an exploit chain is running.
So it's more like a behavioral monitor catching things post-compromise.
Exactly. It acts as a crucial safety net, especially for users who might sideload apps from outside the official Play Store. That's often a route attackers use to deliver the later stages of an exploit chain after gaining initial access via something like this RCE.
We mentioned that newer Android versions, like 16, are affected, but you also said they have better defenses. Can you expand on that? How is running Android 16, even with this flaw existing, safer than sticking with an unpatched Android 13?
Oh, it's a significant difference. It really comes down to the cost and complexity for the attacker. Newer Android versions have layers of advanced mitigations built in. Things like better kernel-level memory protection, maybe memory tagging is enabled, stricter enforcement of randomization techniques like ASLR, stronger separation between different OS components. The list goes on.
So the architecture itself is tougher.
Much tougher. While a zero-click RCE like this proves a flaw still exists, actually weaponizing that flaw into a reliable working exploit that bypasses all those modern defenses is exponentially harder and more expensive for the attacker on something like Android 16 compared to an older version like 13. Staying on older, unpatched versions means you lack all those cumulative architectural improvements. You're basically leaving the door easier to open for attackers.
Okay, so pulling this all together, what's the core mandate for you, the security professional listening, trying to keep devices safe? It seems pretty stark. This combination, zero-click exploitation plus potential system-level access from CVE 2025-48593. It's about as bad as it gets, right? Prompt patching isn't just recommended, it feels absolutely non-negotiable to maintain device integrity and protect sensitive data. You need to be auditing right now, ensuring devices have that 2025-1101 security patch level or newer. Anything less has to be flagged as critical risk until it's updated.
Yeah, and if I could leave one final thought, stepping back a bit, this specific vulnerability, the zero-click RCE in a core system component, it really forces us to ask a tough question about platform security overall.
Hmm.
How high can we realistically build the walls against these kinds of deep-seated memory safety or logic flaws? We're in this constant arms race, Android is getting much harder to attack. We see new mitigations rolling out, memory tagging, kernel hardening, stack protection becoming standard. It's an incredibly hostile environment for attackers compared to a few years ago.
Right.
And yet, sophisticated attackers are still finding ways through. They're bypassing these advanced defenses and getting into the lowest levels of the operating system. The sheer difficulty of defending against something that requires literally zero user interaction, it fundamentally shifts risk management. It pushes us away from just reacting to alerts and towards a more proactive, almost assume breach mentality. It demands constant vigilance at the architectural level. So yeah, patching is essential. It's the immediate fix, but it's not really the solution in the long run. It's more like the ongoing cost of staying in the game against adversaries who are constantly leveling up.
A sobering thought. Patching is the cost of entry, not the final answer.
Yeah.
Definitely something to chew on as you go check those patch levels. We'll leave you with that analysis for today.